Good evening, everybody, and welcome into another episode of New England Sports Weekly. As always, I am your host, Sean Metcalf, and I am glad to join you again. Sorry about last week there. Had a few different things kind of going on Wednesday night. I had a couple obligations there, so I couldn't do this and ran into a few other things. So wanted to do the MLB preview show last week, obviously, before things kicked off on Thursday. But nonetheless, we're going to have a little bit of a delayed MLB preview show. We'll get plenty of baseball going on today. Have a few other topics just because it is New England Sports Weekly and a lot of things going on here. So we will dive into those as well. But I hope you guys are having a good time and enjoying your first couple weeks of spring here, as it's slowly but surely getting towards that time where we can all be outside and enjoy the spring and play baseball and just enjoy New England in the good weather here instead of being stuck inside all the time. But nonetheless, we got a lot to get to here, so we'll dispense with some of the pleasantries. And as always, we start off with the out of the box segment, and still proudly brought to you by me. Maybe someday we'll have a sponsor jump on board, but for now, it is brought to you by yours truly. And of course, as always, the out of the box segment, we will kick things off with the big headline stories here. Now, of course, one news report or report out by Pro Football Focus and Mike Florio specifically stating that the Patriots have looked to reportedly shopped Mac Jones to four teams that came up specifically, including the Las Vegas Raiders. And of course, their head coach is Mac Jones's former offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels. So a little bit of the way this offseason's going, not a surprise from that standpoint, but so the Days of Our Lives style show that is going on here with the New England Patriots, it keeps on turning, folks, and it is just it's a fruity whip headache to steal that line from somebody there. But it is just when you think things might start to calm a little down. We had the Lamar Jackson stuff come out a couple weeks ago. Then you had a little bit of a lull for about a week or so, or maybe a little less than that. And you're like, all right, maybe it's calmed down. We're getting ready for the draft. And now, of course, this happens. This comes out, and you're like, what in the hell else is going to come out with the New England Patriots? So that article came out. We'll get into that a little bit here. We'll obviously going to touch on that. And then in a little more lighter news, the Boston Bruins have clinched the President's Trophy with the best record in all of the NHL. So they will go into the playoffs, and the road to the Stanley Cup goes through Boston all the way through to the finals if the Bruins can make it there. And they are still on pace to break the all-time wins record, which stands at 62 62 victories, which is a tie with the Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning of the 72-73 Canadiens and the 18-19 Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Bruins will look to, and they have 5 games left on the regular season to try to break that record. Now, obviously, they're more worried about the playoffs at this standpoint, but it was kind of nice to hear Jim Montgomery mention that in the beginning of the season, when things started midway through looking like they were going to be on record to do this, they said they weren't focused on it. And now they have admitted now, with everything kind of locked up and everything ready to go, that this might be some history that they might shoot for in this standpoint. So that'll be interesting to see if they do go in to try to get this wins record. And like I said, they actually can afford a couple losses here and still break the record. And the Boston Celtics did drop their last game against my apologies. They dropped their last game last night and a little against the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, of course, there was no Jaylen Brown last night, no Time Lord. So they were a little short-handed last night, but they did drop it looked like it was going to be a 7-point loss, but they almost pulled it out at the end there with a couple crazy calls and a few incidences there at the end where it was almost a Jason Tatum 3 that almost could have won it, but he didn't knock the shot down. So they did end up with the loss to the 76ers, but still have a 2-game cushion over the 76ers with, if you include tonight's matchup with the Toronto Raptors, 3 games to go. So basically, at this point, you win tonight against Toronto with a 2-game lead over the 76ers. I believe they have the tiebreakers at this standpoint. Then I believe that would clinch the 2 seed. And then you have another game against Toronto, and then you close things out again with the Atlanta Hawks. So if you can win these next 2 games against the Raptors, then you can really take the Sunday's game against the Atlanta Hawks. You can take that off and just rest up. Everybody get ready for the playoffs, which will start here shortly. So the Boston Celtics are getting ready for the playoffs. So are the Boston Bruins as well. And of course, the Boston Red Sox did kick off the season last Thursday as they played the Baltimore Orioles and did get drubbed to start the game as Corey Kluber had a rough go of it. Although the Boston Red Sox did make a comeback, they were down at one point at 10-5, made a comeback, lost 10-9, and they should have lost the second game of that series. But the Baltimore left fielder dropped the ball for the last out, which would have been the last out of the game, with a easy can of corn from Masataka Yoshida, and Adam Duvall, who's been red hot, cranked a 2-run line drive home run right over the monster, stuck into the pads for a second and fell out. And it was a walk-off shot for Duvall. They ended up winning against the Orioles. And now they have gotten swept against the Pittsburgh Pirates, a team which you should have been right in that series, but they got hit around the last 2 games. In the first game where it looked at the Red Sox were going to mash their way to a victory, just threw up. Their pitching just has not been great. They ended up losing 7-6 in the opener against the Pirates. So the Red Sox pitching has been an issue. The offense, surprisingly, has been pretty decent, but it has been a rough start as far as for the Red Sox have been concerned. They haven't had like an even flow when it comes to having the offense not on the 9-run pace that they were the first 3 games, and then even scoring 6 runs the first game against the Pirates. The offense wasn't a problem there, but the last 2 games it's just fallen off the table. It went from mashing the ball to just barely getting anything going. And of course, the pitching outside of today with Corey Kluber pitching a very solid game, only giving up the 1 run through 5 innings and getting pulled in the 6th inning, which that still had me scratch my head a little bit why he got pulled, because he only had 67 pitches. I know we're just right out of spring training, but I would have let him get into that 90 mark at this point. You're in the regular season. It's not going to put a lot of stress on his arm. He's a veteran, but he got pulled. Red Sox ended up losing today 4-1. But that was really, along with Tanner Houck's solid outing where he gave up the 3 runs, those have been the only 2 solid starts of this season. Otherwise, the pitching has just been lackluster, to say the least. So the Red Sox have dropped to 2-4 on this young season as they will head out to Detroit tonight to play a 3-game series in 4 days with Friday off in Detroit starting tomorrow at 1:00. So the Boston Red Sox are trying to get back on the winning side of things early on here. As we mentioned, we will definitely jump right into the Red Sox here in a little bit with the season preview. But before we get into our MLB preview, I do want to touch on that report with the New England Patriots with Mike Florio as far as the dysfunction that has continued to crop up in the New England Patriots organization this offseason. Now, of course, we've had a myriad of things go on. Obviously, the whole situation with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, where finally Matt Patricia and Judge have basically have been relieved of their duties. Joe Judge has been reassigned and is now going to be kind of a nebulous role, but won't really be around the offense at all. He's just going to be helping out with special teams and doing a few things in the front office. So he is really, it's just a nebulous role that he's going to partake in. And obviously Matt Patricia, the de facto offensive coordinator, is gone from that role. He hasn't been brought back to the Patriots, but he also hasn't been officially fired from that role. So it's, I don't know, it's weird, but he's obviously not going to get that role back, because we all know they brought in Bill O'Brien to take over that role. And now Bill O'Brien's going to be saying, what in the hell did I get myself into in this organization? Because he came back and thought, all right, I'm going to be working with Mac Jones and what's going to happen here. And now it's just all the shit's hitting the fan. It is just weird what's happening here. But again, the report by Mike Florio suggests that there have been some 1-for-1 trades. There have been some other opportunities here where there were 4 teams. So basically, the gist of this is that the Patriots, mainly Belichick, was upset with Mac Jones going outside of the circle of trust, if you will, outside the family last year, when he called another source, if you will, or another coach or player. It's really, nobody knows, but there's been speculation that it was Josh McDaniels with the Raiders, that when McDaniels last year called for outside help when things were going poorly for him or for this offense. But so Belichick basically is kind of been fed up with how Mac Jones, as far as the way he's been acting out. And this is just, again, this is all just part of like just part of the report from Mike Florio, which I always take things from Mike Florio with a grain of salt. He is a solid reporter. There are things that he has sensationalized over his time between NBC and then with Pro Football Talk and everything around there. But basically, Mike Florio in his report was saying that the Patriots were looking to trade Mac Jones and try to recoup first-round picks for Mac Jones, try to get something back from Mac. Now, the Raiders were mentioned in that report. The 49ers were mentioned in that report, possibly going after Trey Lance. So, again, this all kind of stems back to just this relationship over like the last 9 months with Mac Jones, that things have gone south between he and Belichick. And it's gone from the point where in the summer, July of last year, Belichick was ranting and raving about him. Well, in the Belichick way, not like any fan would do, but just complimenting Mac Jones, and we all know that Belichick throws compliments around like manhole covers. So he doesn't do it a lot. But he did for Mac during training camp in July. But it did not take long into September and October when things went south. And of course, when we found out in the offseason that Mac Jones had reached out to an outside source, maybe the Raiders, whoever it was, and then now there have been reports that he reached out to Alabama as well. And we all know that Nick Saban is Belichick's friend. So was Saban the quote unquote rat that that ratted him out to Belichick? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but it's just it's just ridiculous because what are the Patriots going to get back at quarterback? Because you want to do you want to trade Mac right now? You're not going to get anything for him. You're not going to get. He's at his lowest his value has been. You're not going to get a thing back for him. You'll maybe a third round pick. I don't think you're going to be able to recoup first round picks unless you and there's no team out there sans the 49ers that is going to be desperate enough, because right now, obviously, San Francisco is quarterback needy with Trey Lance still recovering from his injury and the surgery to Brock Purdy. And obviously, Jimmy Garoppolo is out the door, but that was orchestrated by the 49ers themselves. But if you really look around the league, there's not a whole lot of landing spots out there, because even other teams out there that you might take a shot normally probably want to go the route of the draft, or if they have a young guy themselves, would rather take a shot on that. And of course, you go look around all the other teams that have veteran starters that they're either comfortable with, or they're competent enough, so they're not going to go over to still at this point an unknown commodity in Mac, who had one really good year and a very subpar year last year. But the hard part here for the Patriots is that, or at least for the organization, is that this isn't just going to be one big meeting that they're going to have, and everything is going to be a-okay afterwards, and it's all going to get swept under the rug or water under the bridge. No, there's still going to be some tension there. There's still going to be a little bit of both Belichick and both Mac Jones are going to be kind of looking at each other sideways at times. Now, this is going to be up to Bill O'Brien to kind of bridge this gap here, kind of be the mediator from this standpoint, as far as if there's still any animosity, and just as far as Bill O'Brien to be like, all right, no, I'm just going to handle, obviously you come to me for any of the offensive issues. And he worked with them a little bit at Alabama towards the end of Mac Jones's career there. So it's going to be interesting to see how this relationship goes with Belichick and Mac, because I know everybody wants to throw out, oh, they just go out and sign Lamar Jackson. And listen, I would love to have Lamar Jackson on the Patriots. It would be very exciting. Now, does it guarantee that they would be in the conversation for the Super Bowl contention? Not necessarily, but at the same time, it definitely makes them a playoff team. But I doubt that the Patriots are just going to open their checkbook and give Lamar Jackson $200 some odd million and guarantee most of it, and not going to pay him $35 to $40 million guaranteed, or $40 million a year, and have that hit the cap. That's just not Belichick's MO. He's never paid. Well, I shouldn't say never. Brady did get top dollar towards the beginning of his career, but obviously he scaled that because what the money was at the time. But still, and even when Brady started to get paid more, like $15 to $20 million, it still wasn't tip top of the league. So Belichick has never paid that much for a quarterback. And I just don't, as much as he loves Lamar, I just don't see that it's going to happen. And so what else are you going to do? I know people have said, oh, trade him to the Raiders. Maybe you can kind of flip Jimmy Garoppolo, but I don't want Jimmy Garoppolo at this standpoint of his career. where he's in his mid 30s now. He's been injury prone, and you're just playing. You're just playing to stay even at that point. And I still think there's upside to Mac. It's just did you ruin did you ruin him from a mental standpoint of wanting to be here in New England, where I think when he first got here, he was happy to be here. He seemed like he was the perfect soldier for Belichick to just kind of be like, okay, yeah, I'll do whatever. And then now after you took after not took away, but after McDaniels left, you put him in a untenable situation with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, who just were incompetent. And then the reports are that he was upset and mad that Mac Jones went outside of the trust tree or whatever, the family, to go get help. Then you've eroded trust. That's undeniable. There's been trust that's been eroded between these two. And again, I don't blame. I fall in the camp of Mac as far as being on his side, because yes, did Mac have some? Did he act out at times last year? And were there things that even I was like, okay, buddy, you gotta calm down a little bit here. Yes, but at the same time, he got saddled with a piss poor situation as far as his offensive staff, and you expect him to go out there and just eat this shit sandwich and just sit there and be like, yeah, I'm okay, I'm good to go. I'm just going to go out there and play ball for you. No, I wouldn't expect him to do that, and I don't want to rehash this conversation that we've already had there. But I, like I said, I'm not saying that this is not a possibility, and I'm not calling this erroneous reporting or anything. No, this I can see that the Patriots might have inquired about maybe looking to move on, but see what they could get. But I mean, at this time, you have somebody on their rookie contract, and unless you're willing to pay up for Mac Jones, then excuse me, for Lamar Jackson, then really your only other option is to go into the draft. And where the Patriots sit right now, they're not going to get the Bryce Youngs, the CJ Strouds, any of those top tier quarterbacks that are going to go in the first 10 picks. There have been 4 quarterbacks in most drafts that have been all projected to go in that top 10 before they even gets to number 14. So you're going to be back in the same situation like when you selected Mac, where Mac was the quote unquote best available there. Now, I remember at the time I was pissed because I wanted Justin Fields, who was the second best quarterback, or I should say, was in the conversation for the number 1 pick, obviously, and then Trevor Lawrence just was a generational talent. But you had Justin Fields, who was the second best quarterback in the draft, and everything that was going on during the time. We all remember talking about it at that time. If they could land Justin Fields, that would be perfect. And they had an opportunity to before Chicago traded up and jumped in front of them. But Mac's grown on me here a little bit. And this year was a tough year. It was a tough year to support Mac. I will be honest, but just if you're going to get back in the draft, unless you're willing to spend a lot of capital to get into that probably top 5, top 7, to get a CJ Stroud or a Bryce Young or whoever is your quarterback of choice. I mean, I honestly would prefer Bryce Young. That's my opinion. But that's going to cost a lot. And if you just stay there at 14 and expect to try to draft a quarterback, that's not going to happen. But I still think there's enough there with Mac. You get him a receiver, may either trade for him before the draft or during the draft. or you select a first round wide receiver. You try to build around. I still think there's enough there with Mac, and now that you have Bill O'Brien, but the thing that's become undeniable over this time is that there's been a fracture in this relationship between Mac Jones and Belichick. And Robert Kraft isn't free from any blame in this at either, because he's let this kind of get to this standpoint. And the way that things just have gone the last couple of years here with Belichick, he's the greatest coach of all time, but there becomes a point, an expiration point for all coaches. And you have to ask, has that expiration date come for Belichick? Because just the way he's operated the last couple of years and the way that you have brought just friends and family into the organization. And I'm not saying that like Steven Belichick hasn't been a good coach, but more or less the Matt Patricia and Joe Judge aspect of this, where you're just bringing them in and putting them in situations where they shouldn't be, and ruining a good and well, I shouldn't say ruining, but you're coming close to it, depending on what we see this year with Mac Jones. You're in jeopardy of ruining a good asset that you have if you already haven't. And I and just the things that we've heard go on behind the scenes, at least reportedly this off season or during the season, it's it just is it's head scratching for an organization that was run so well for 20 plus years, to all of a sudden for the last 3 years, everything is starting to come unglued. At least that's kind of the way it feels. Where you kind of had the 1 year in there in 2021 where things seemed like we're getting back on track and we're in the right direction, and then just all fell apart, it seemed like. And like I mentioned, it's not going to just all magically be fixed with one meeting with the whole team. It's still, the animosity is still going to be there. This relationship's going to have to get patched up with time and in multiple olive branches here. But it's it's just it's just frustrating why Bill just continues to not admit his fault in this situation. It just seems like Belichick's ego is just not willing to surrender at this point. I mean, Mac Jones, like I said, Mac Jones, he's got a little bit of this to blame too, as far as just kind of the way he kind of acted out in like that Cardinals game and some of those other games towards the end of the season. But at the same time, I just would at this point, I just would like to see kind of Belichick maybe just all right, just back up and maybe make some public apologies here to Mac, or make some like public declarations of no, Mac's our quarterback and we believe in him, or something along those lines. But the undeniable truth here is that Belichick has created a fracture in this relationship with multiple decisions that he's made, and it's up to Belichick to repair this relationship at this standpoint. I know I went a little longer on that, but that's just kind of been the thing that's been swirling around here with the Patriots and Mac Jones and Belichick and all the reports that are coming out. And it's it's just a gigantic soap opera, and it's not going to end anytime soon. And for an organization that prided itself on not giving you any material, they've gone completely 180 on this, and they are giving us story after story after story after story, and most of it hasn't been great. So it's just been reality television out there for New England. So it's been, in not the best way possible, it's been entertaining. It's been like watching a dump. It's been like watching a fire or watching a car accident. You can't look away from it. It's not good, but you can't look away. So I guess any news is good news, I guess, however you want to term it. But it's I just I just don't know how this is going to get fixed. I've been racking my brain around it. I just don't know how this is going to get fixed. It's going to take a lot of time, not one miraculous meeting. But we will turn our attention over to the Major League Baseball season, which I know we're calling it the preview show. We missed, like I said, I missed last week because of a few obligations that I had, and it was kind of tough to get a show in over the weekend. But nonetheless, we're here. It's the MLB preview show and the Red Sox season preview as well. And as we mentioned, the Red Sox have started this season 4-2. Now, my expectations for the Red Sox to start this season, I mean, it's kind of matched up with things that have kind of gone on early on, but going into this season, of course, if you've been living under a rock, they have lost Xander Bogaerts, signed with the San Diego Padres. And by the way, he's off to a hot start. He has 3 home runs and batting over 400. Not that we're keeping track here, but he's off to a hot start. JD Martinez is gone. He's with the Los Angeles Dodgers. And you lost Michael Wacha to the Padres as well. You've lost in Christian Vasquez, who they traded at the trade deadline. There was maybe some speculation that they might bring him back as a free agent, but he is signed with the Minnesota Twins. And just piece after piece has left this organization from that 2018 championship run. Now, JD Martinez is getting a little long in the tooth. So that one, I'm not as upset with him leaving. I mean, I still would have, if he would have come back here on like a 1-year deal, or 2-year deal or something, I would have taken him back. But obviously the Bogaerts one is huge, not bringing back Bogaerts. You lost Nathan Eovaldi to the Texas Rangers. That was a veteran starter and a big game pitcher that you lost. So the talent drain from the team during the offseason was huge. Now, the additions, just to refresh you, that they brought in Masataka Yoshida, the Japanese hitting sensation that is a career 321 hitter. And of course, you brought in veterans in Justin Turner and Adam Duvall to help strengthen the lineup. And on the pitching side of things, you did bolster that bullpen with Kenley Jansen and Chris Martin. You brought in Jolie Rodriguez, but he did get hurt during spring training. He's going to be out for a little bit. You also, in the starting rotation, did bring in Corey Kluber, the veteran 2-time Cy Young Award winner, except for he's 36 years old, so we're not going to get the 2015, 2016, 2017 Corey Kluber, who was a absolute force for the then Cleveland Indians, now Cleveland Guardians. I just have lower expectations for this roster. If we start off with that lineup that the Red Sox have put together, it's just seemed outside of Rafael Devers. Rafael Devers is and before we forget, remember Rafael Devers signed that massive 10-year extension, technically 11 if you tack on this year with the arbitration, for $331 million, which ends up being just a little over $30 million a year for Rafi. So he's back in the fold for a long time. And just as an aside, if you watched opening day, the embarrassing thing there was, just because they're trying to drum up attention and trying to kind of make up for things when they said, Rafael Devers, you will be here for 10 more years, however they worded it. It was just embarrassing that they had to throw in that they signed him to a 10-year deal. You don't hear that. It's not like when Manny Ramirez first did that in 2001, you heard Manny Ramirez signed an 8-year contract with the Boston Red Sox. No, of course, we know what they're trying to do. Of course, I'm happy that Rafi's here, but I wanted him to stay, and he's one of the best young hitters. But the point here is, it was embarrassing to kind of watch that and be like, oh my God, we have to go to, he signed this 10-year deal, or, hey, this guy, or with Justin Turner, I think the Roberto Clemente Award, which is a special award for the things that you do in your community. But to sit there and be like, yeah, we're gonna bring this out, um, just because, so that you watch this game and you're like, oh yeah, we're parlaying favors here. But as far as this goes for this lineup, you got Rafael Devers, who's the only stud remaining in this lineup, the one legitimate player that you have. And then you filled it in with just a bunch of what feels like role players. That's all it feels like, is role players on this team. Like Alex Verdugo to me is a average MLB outfielder, and he seems like he could have one of those 1 to 2 all-star appearances in his career, be a solid guy, but he should be like your 7th or 8th best starter. Then obviously you look at, you brought in Justin Turner during the offseason. Justin Turner is a veteran, won a World Series in 2020. He's been to a bunch of World Series with the Dodgers. He's a guy that he's not going to, I believe the most home runs he's hit in a season has been 27. So he doesn't, it's not like he's a punch and Judy out there, but we're not talking about a 3-hole hitter that's going to blast 30 home runs and drive in 120 runs. He's going to be a solid bat that will be productive, just not what we're used to in a classic 3-hole hitter for the Boston Red Sox. Then they brought in Adam Duvall, who is a guy that can mash the ball. He's hit 38 home runs. He's hit multiple 30-plus home run seasons, so he's got a lot of power in the bat. He does strike out a lot and hits and is like a 220 career average hitter. So we're not talking about a 300 hitter, although right now he is absolutely on fire and is hitting over 500 on the season for the Red Sox. So he's off to a quick start and tied a Red Sox record with 9 RBIs to start the season, and came up clutch, as we mentioned earlier, against the Orioles. But again, this is a guy that he's older. I believe he's 37, 38 years old. And he's a veteran guy that has won a world championship with the Atlanta Braves in 2021, when he hit 38 home runs between Miami and with Atlanta. So again, between what you have in Turner and Duvall, you're talking about guys, to me, especially Turner. Turner feels like he would be a really good complemental bat if you had 2 other stars in this lineup. And if you had a healthy Trevor Story, you could argue that you might have another bat, and you might have that second star bat in the lineup or to go along with Devers, but right now you don't. So, but again, you don't have those other star bats in the lineup to complement, to help out Devers. So, and Adam Duvall, yes, he can hit a lot of home runs, but again, this is a guy that he reminds me of Hunter Renfroe as far as in that 2021 season, where you had a good lineup, and then that allowed Hunter Renfroe to hit 6th or hit 7th in that lineup, where he was also a guy that would be a 220, 230 hitter, but blast 30 home runs. And that's what he did. So to have Duvall have to be your 5th hitter or your 4th hitter, that's kind of scary. Now, the one X factor the 2 X factors in this, the first one that I'll get to in this lineup is Masataka Yoshida. Now, Masataka Yoshida is the unknown, because this is a guy that's a career 321 hitter in Japan. The most he struck out in a season, I believe, was 40 some odd times or in a season. So he doesn't strike out a lot, at least in Japan. He gets on base a lot, draws a lot of walks, has a high on base percentage. And when we first got their scouting report, we all thought, this is kind of like a leadoff hitter, makes contact, slaps the ball the other way, or sprays the ball the other way. But when we saw he hit fourth for Team Japan in the World Baseball Classic, drove in 10 runs, which was a WBC record, hit 2 home runs, protecting Shohei Ohtani. So this might be a bat that's better served for middle of the order, 4-5, down in the order. And so far it's been a mixed bag. He's gotten on base, but he's only hitting 200. He did hit his first home run last night, or Monday night, excuse me. So he's still that unknown. Will he develop into more that middle of the order back? Because he has hit his career high was 29 home runs with the Oryx Buffaloes in Japan. But again, it's still an unknown. Will he translate over to the major leagues as far as his skills? Will he be able to adjust to that higher velocity? Because in Japan, if you've listened to Kevin Youkilis, who's had a look, who's known people that have had experience over there, Japan is more the off speed as far as sliders, splitters, changeup, curveballs. Yes, they still throw fastballs, but you don't see as much as the high velocity as you do here. It still exists, but on a more average basis, you see it over here. Guys throwing 95 and above. So can he adjust to the league? And then the other X factor is going to be Triston Casas, who last year hit 5 home runs, got on base, drew walks, showed good command of the strike zone, but did only bat 197. He's off to a little bit of a slow start this year as well. Did have that home run on Monday night as well in that home run barrage. But still, Casas hasn't really looked comfortable yet to get going. But again, this is a guy that was was your second best prospect behind Marcelo Meyer in the system. And we're not just saying, he's the second best prospect. He's quote unquote. No, this is a legitimate high-end prospect, power hitting first baseman. He's projected to be a middle of the order bat, kind of. I don't want to set him up for failure, but he's been compared with that swing and that body size to Freddie Freeman. So if he gets to be a Freddie Freeman type, that's a middle that can hit 30 bombs, be close to 300 plus hitter in his career like Freddie Freeman's been, and be a Gold Glove first baseman like Freddie. So if you're getting a middle of the order bat, then that'd be perfect. Now in this first year, I'm not like expecting 30 home runs, but 20 to 25 home runs as a rookie would be great to see from Triston. Hit 270, get on base, get a high on base percentage so that you're on there for those guys below you in the order. I'd be happy with that, just to show that, okay, yeah, this is a guy that can hit 20 to 25 home runs and shows potential that, okay, once you get better in this league, then I can be a 30 and 100 guy. So that's the X factor there with Casas, is that he's shown it in the minor leagues that he's a power hitter, and not just your 220 power hitter, but he can be a guy that can hit in the 270s, 280s, kind of lurk around the 300s. So you can have a good middle of the order bat. So those two between Yoshida and Casas, who are both rookies, because technically Yoshida counts as a rookie, those are two guys that are Yoshida more the unknown, just because we didn't get to see him as much. Now Casas being a minor leaguer for the Red Sox, and obviously myself, since he played in Portland and then Worcester, I got to see some of his games. And then, of course, last year his cup of coffee that he had with the Red Sox. You get to see him. So the point being here is that you have those two unknowns where if they develop into good everyday MLB players that have some pop in the bat that can both be 20 plus home run guys and be solid middle order bats, then develop them, then that's perfect. Then you're on your way to having something there. And then of course, then in the future, just try to bring in some free agent hitters, bring in some free agent outfielders, middle of the field type of shortstop, second base, center field types that can bolster this lineup as well. But that's just building on that. Now, of course, for me, the concern here is that you lost Trevor Story, you didn't re-sign Xander Bogaerts, so there's two all-star shortstops, and then in Trevor Story's case, he transitioned over to second. But those are two middle-of-the-order bats that you don't have. One you're never going to have again because you effed up and you let him go to San Diego, and you should have re-signed him at least last offseason, if not 2 off seasons ago. Not that I'm bitter about that or anything. And then with Trevor Story, possibly July or August, because it looks as though because the reports are that he's been out there taking some balls at second base, and he's starting to get back on his feet, starting to rehab a little bit here. So, and possibly it could work to where he could DH and come back in, and you could just use the bat there in August before he's ready to go. But the middle of the infield, and then Kike Hernandez. I love Kike as far as if he's your utility guy, if he's the guy that is, if you had a stronger lineup and you didn't have to rely on him as much. I mean, he's a good, solid, he's a great outfield. He's a great center fielder. He doesn't, if you ask him, he'll say no. But that middle of the infield is just right now is just Swiss cheese because you're putting it together with duct tape and bubble gum and hoping something works. Because again, Arroyo is another guy that he should be your fourth, your fifth infielder or your utility, another guy that should be on the bench but can play when needed. And I know he was a first round pick by the San Francisco Giants. It didn't work out there, but just because of health. And he's shown flashes, but again, this is not a guy that I want being 150 plus games a year at second base, being your everyday second baseman. I mean, he could surprise us, but I mean, he's your perfect fill-in guy, your perfect bench bat, your perfect bench guy. But now you're relying on him every day. So, and then obviously you look behind the plate, Reese McGuire and Connor Wong leave something to be desired. I know Reese McGuire had a little bit of a hot streak to end last season after he got traded to Boston, but it just nothing to the point where I was saying, okay, this is your future catcher. This is your future all-star catcher. No, and he's looked horrible. He hasn't thrown a damn person out because the Orioles and Pirates ran roughshod over the Red Sox in the first 2 series. So again, it's a lineup with one superstar in Rafael Devers. Rafael Devers would be a middle of the order at bat for every lineup in Major League Baseball. He's that good. But again, before and after Rafael Devers, it's a bunch of good, solid Major League players that are professional at bats. And that's the one thing that I at least can say about the Red Sox this year. They did get professional bats. Last year, even though you had Xander Bogaerts, you had Christian Vasquez, you had Trevor Story for the minus some injuries he battled, you had a better core last year. The offensively was a better core of offensive pieces with those guys I mentioned. But 1 through 9 last year, the outfield was just a mess last year. You had to rely on guys like Franchi Cordero and Jarren Duran. At times you had to put Arroyo out there in right field and watch balls just absolutely eat him up. And he had that one game where I felt so bad for him. The camera caught him. Well, I mean, they're going to see him because you're trying to catch the ball, but on camera, he threw his hands up in the air, was freaking out just because he couldn't find the ball, lost the ball, and that was sad because he shouldn't be in that position. He's a second baseman. He's an infielder, and I know you can say, well, infielders can catch pop ups, but it's different trying to judge it from that distance. It's not just a quick little high pop up, but again, the outfield was a mess. First base was a mess, and I know what kind of always makes me scratch my head is the Bobby Dahlbach defenders. It's like, yes, did he hit 25 home runs in 2021? Did he have that stretch when he first came up where he hit all those home runs? Yes, he did back in 2020. But listen, Bobby Dahlbach has power, but he strikes out a ton. It doesn't get on base enough for me. Like if he was drawing walks and getting on base and hitting 25 home runs, I could almost stomach the 220 average, the 213 average, or whatever it is. But when you already have Adam Duvall who can do that, you can't just have a lineup full of those guys. This is MLB where we're getting back to having to have contact because remember, there's the pitch clock now. There's new rules as far as the limited amount of pickoffs. You can only go try to pick off a batter twice. You can only check a batter runner twice before you actually have to throw over. So there's more strategy coming back into the game. And of course, the hitter has until the 8-second mark to look at the pitcher or else he gets called a ball. So which we all learned that pretty quick with Rafi. But the point being here is that it's Rafael Devers, and then you have good, solid veterans that make up an okay lineup. It's nothing that I'm gonna look back in 20 years and be like, man, that was one of the best lineups they ever had. No, but I'm not going to be like, man, that was the worst lineup they ever had, because you have some quality MLB bats and then you have two unknowns in Yoshida and Casas who, if that turns out, then you couldn't have a pretty solid lineup if those guys turn out to be anything. Now, looking over at the pitching side, this is where I'm most disappointed. I thought Chaim Bloom was going to try to get another frontline starter, try to get, or a number 2, number 3, like get a good solid starter to come in. Now, obviously, we heard the rumors where they try to go to the Cleveland Indians or the Guardians and try to get a Shane Bieber, try to get him, or try to go through the Marlins, who did trade away Pablo Sanchez, no, not Pablo Sanchez. Why am I blanking? But he went to the Twins. Pablo, not Sandoval. Pablo. I am having a day here, but we all remember. But somebody's got to look it up and correct me here. But Pablo went to the Minnesota Twins, and there were talks about Trevor Rogers. Really, nothing about Alcantara, because Alcantara is a young stud at this point. So you'd have to give up your entire farm and then probably about like 5 MLB ready players to get Alcantara from the Miami Marlins. But basically, that whole Marlins staff is full of young, really good pitchers. So, of course, you were excited to see what they could do. And then they did bring in Johnny Cueto as well. So they have a pretty good rotation there down in Miami. So there's hopes that maybe you could pluck somebody away from Miami. Other trade talks out there as well. And of course, there were free agents. The one I really wanted that the Yankees swooped in and picked up was Carlos Rodon, who formerly was of the White Sox and formerly of the Giants last year. and he opted out. And this was a guy that's who's really come on strong the last couple of years and really developed into what we all thought that he was going to be when the White Sox first drafted him. And he's become that. He's become that front of the line starter. And the Yankees swooped in, gave him that 6-year, 120 or $130 million deal. Now, obviously, he's hurt to start the year, but that was before we all knew. But I really wanted Carlos Rodon. And you still could have added a Corey Kluber to this equation like they did, but you could have added Corey Kluber, who was cheap, and still added a Rodon, or still went out and traded for a guy. And one of them that I kind of was a pipe dream was Corbin Burns with the Brewers, because Corbin Burns, it seemed like he and the Brewers had a little bit of a falling out there, but he ended up staying, well, at least for right now, is still with the Milwaukee Brewers, who we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But the point being is here that the pitching is just a bunch of hopes and dreams and relying on guys that are past their prime, really injury prone. There's just a lot of ifs, ands, and buts about this pitching staff. You have Chris Sale, who, God love him, and I don't fault him for his competitiveness, but just the whole act as far as him, like, I get that he's genuine about it when he screws up and has a bad outing, but there just comes a time when you need to put up or shut up. And I get when he did get rocked his first start on Saturday, but I mean, at this point, you just got to go out and you got to shove. You got to go out there and you just got to pitch well. No more, no more press conferences. Well, I suck today, and I understand I suck, and man, I was horrible, and because he'll take accountability. But to be the best accountability, guys like Pedro, guys like they're true aces of the game, Pedro's, the Schillings, the DeGroms, the Scherzers, the Verlanders, the you name them over the years. They go out, they have a bad outing, they'll come right back out instead of and they'll shove. They'll go out there and they'll throw 6-7 shutout innings, or 6-7 one-run innings, two-run innings, and they'll win the game. And I understand that there have been some fluke injuries. I don't fault him for the injuries, but it just comes a time when you have to show that you have to show up. And I'm not ready to stick a fork in him. But if he continues, if he has a couple more bad starts, then it's gonna, after having a rocky last season, man, I'm not gonna hit the panic button, but I'm gonna start to get worried here. But right now, gonna give him the benefit of the doubt. You're finally back. You're finally healthy. He was throwing 97. The stuff was physically there. The location was off, and he was getting rocked. But just now it comes time for Chris Sale just to kind of to show out now, instead of just, all right, we've heard all the excuses. We've heard all the taking accountability, but now it's just, you really want to show the accountability. You got to go out there. You got to be the ace that you're paid that you're paid to be, because since you signed that extension in 2019, we've gotten absolutely nothing out of it. And then Corey Kluber is, like I mentioned, he's a 2-time Cy Young Award winner, but he's 36 years old. He's not the same Corey Kluber that won those Cy Young and was an absolute stud, a horse for those Indians teams. He's no longer that, but he's a solid veteran starter. And you got Nick Pivetta, who either looks like an all-star or just looks like your run-of-the-mill average pitcher after he gets rocked for 5 runs over 3 innings. So there's really no in-between there with Nick Pivetta. For me, he's that perfect number 4 to number 5 guy. But of course, with injuries and the way things have gone, you can't put him that far back. And at least to start the season, you have Cutter Crawford, who's going to be a bullpen arm, but because of injuries to Bayo and Whitlock and Paxton, he's going to be in the starting rotation until they're healthy. And of course, and Tanner Houck, who I want him selfishly, I want him back in the bullpen along with Garrett Whitlock. If all things being equal, I would replace those two with a healthy Paxton and a healthy Bayo, and put Whitlock and put Houck back into the bullpen and strengthen that part of your rotation or that part of your pitching staff. But right now, Houck had an okay start against the Orioles, gave up the 3 runs and over the 5 innings of work, and was solid. Not spectacular, but was solid. One of the very few starts this season for the Red Sox that actually has gone okay. But that was just my worry coming into the season, and so far it's bit the Red Sox in the ass in the early going, because right now it's just been, it's been tough to watch this Red Sox starting rotation, minus today's start by Corey Kluber and Tanner Houck start on Saturday. Other than that, the Red Sox have just been subpar, to put it politely, out there. And as far as this rotation, the hope for you is that Whitlock, who came up as a starter in the Yankee system before getting selected by the Red Sox in the Rule 5 draft, who's been lights out of the bullpen, can translate into the starting rotation. If you can find something, if Whitlock can transfer what he's done in the bullpen over to a starter and be a solid third starter in your rotation, that would be it. That would be good. And then Brian Bayo is the one true top pitching prospect that they've had. The Red Sox have had a hell of a time developing young arms in their system, but they finally might have something here in Brian Bayo. And I know the expectations were off the charts last year after coming up, and he unfairly got compared to Pedro because of the changeup fastball combination that he has going. And then after he had a rocky first stint with the Red Sox, he got called back up and actually pitched pretty well down the stretch in his second call up. And he worked with Pedro all off season. He tweaked some of the things that he was doing, and he had the arm tightness to begin the year, or begin spring training. So they shut him down for a little bit, and then he ramped it back up over the last 2-3 weeks of spring training. So he's a little behind, but he was scheduled to pitch in Worcester, but then he got pushed back because of weather. And then he got sent down to Florida to pitch some inter squad games. And he'll probably actually maybe be back up in Portland with the Sea Dogs to have some a rehab start or two. But those 2 reinforcements are coming along quicker here. And of course, James Paxton, who is another cryptid in his own rights there, because didn't pitch at all last year. He got paid $10 million to rehab, and now this year he's hoping that he can get back out there on the field for the Red Sox. So if you get those reinforcements, then again, it's still some ifs, because obviously with Paxton, it's the Sale thing as far as being often injured. Can he pitch and get back to his former self? And then the two other unknowns from the standpoint of Whitlock, because we've never seen him be a starter with the Red Sox. It's always been out of the bullpen, or I shouldn't say never, but it's been a very, very small sample size of 2-3 starts that he's had before he went to the rotation. Can he be a solid starter for you? And then Brian Bayo is the guy that I'm really excited to see a full season out of. Can he develop into a frontline starter, which we all think he can be? Now, there's going to be a lot of expectations on him because of the unknowns in this pitching staff. Can he turn into what we expect out of him? That's going to be what I'm excited for this year. And then we all, like we talked about at the beginning, we know the additions that they made in the bullpen. you finally have a closer in Kenley Jensen. He looked pretty good against the Orioles when he had to come in over the weekend in his only appearance. Chris Martin is a solid setup guy. And then once you kind of get some of those other guys back into the bullpen, so you don't have a Brazier and a Caleb Ort that you have to put into big situations. And Josh Winkowski is a guy that's in the early going of the season has pitched pretty solid. His fastball's up to 95, up all the way up to 97. So he's a guy that looks like he could be a weapon this year. So the bullpen's going to be solid. It's just going to be a matter of, can the starting rotation hand them over a lead? Because that was something that was been few and far between. Even though the Red Sox did get the 2 wins against the Orioles, they had to make the comeback. And against the Pirates, they didn't hand them any leads in this series at all. Or I should say they barely did. That first game they did. But the point here is that the bullpen's going to be solid, but can the starters get them there? Can Chris Sale be back to being Chris Sale? Can you get a solid veteran performance out of Corey Kluber? Is Nick Pivetta going to be Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde the whole season like he was last year? What can Brian Bayo give you? What can Garrett Whitlock give you as a full-time starter now? There's a lot of unknowns in that starting rotation, which honestly, it scares me a lot because, like I said, I love Chris Sale, but it's not the same Chris Sale when they traded for him, because that 2017, 2018 Chris Sale, that was absolutely dominating, absolutely filthy. We haven't seen that for 5 years. 5 years, folks. He's 33, 34 now. It's not the same Chris Sale. I wish it was. I really, really wish that we had that 2017, 2018 Chris Sale. If that was the case, you got your ace, you got your number one, but he has to prove it again. He has to. And Corey Kluber is just a solid veteran. He's not the same Cy Young guy. It's just, there's a lot of question marks. And again, you're relying on a lot of ifs, ands, or buts, just like the lineup. So there's a lot of hoping and praying going on with this Red Sox team from that front office. And I got to tell you, Chaim Bloom and Alex Cora are just, I mean, personally, I would keep Alex Cora, because Alex Cora, to me, is one of the best managers in baseball. I know you can talk about the book that came out from Evan Drellick about the whole, because he was there with Houston with the sign stealing, and obviously what his role that he played in 2018 with the Red Sox. But he's such a good interpersonal communicator with those guys on his team. And I know some people want to be like, well, what did he do last year? For the last 2 trade deadlines, he's like, guys kind of mope around in the locker room, and they complained about not getting help. But how can you, as a manager, tell guys how to feel about not getting help? And Alex Cora probably is still right there with them, being like, you didn't go get me X, Y, and Z. You didn't get me first base help. You didn't get me pitching help. You didn't get me this. I mean, you ended up getting Kyle Schwarber, who shouldn't be a first baseman, but hell, he would look so good as your designated hitter right now. The guy that could hit 30 or 40 bombs like he did last year, hit 46 home runs for the Phillies. But to me, the big thing to watch here is going to be Chaim Bloom and Alex Cora. What's going to happen to them? Are they going to get the can? Are they going to get the axe? And to me, Chaim Bloom is the one that really, really has to watch out for his job there, because if he puts together a lackluster team where, yeah, I do like the fight I've seen out of the offense the first couple series. Now, obviously, the last 2 games against the Pirates leaves a little bit of desire, but again, it's only 6 games. So still a lot of time. We're still so early. But if the offense comes back down to earth, if guys like Yoshida don't live up to the expectations, if the rotation falls apart, if they can't find the average. They can't come back to being a solid rotation instead of just giving up 2+ home runs for each starter, which is a record in MLB now. If you can't, if the rotation just falls apart, if the offense just is Rafael Devers and a bunch of other guys, and Chaim Bloom's not going to be able to see his vision of Marcelo Meyer and Miguel Beliz and Rafael Cedon and all these guys that he's brought. Well, you can see this minor league system that he's tried to build. He's not going to be able to enjoy the fruits of those labor because, I mean, honestly, if this team by the All-Star break is out of it, he may be gone before the trade deadline. So he better hope that this duct tape and glue that he's used sticks, because I'm not super confident in this team. I don't think this is going to be a completely rock bottom Red Sox team either. I think this is going to be a Red Sox team that they're gonna flirt with one of those last wild card spots. They're gonna have some tough games. It's not the way that things have gone. I don't see them having a lot of margin for error. They're going to have to pitch well so that their offense can score those 3-4 runs a night or 5 runs to try to win those games. I'm going to have to pitch. The starting pitching is going to be the key here of limiting those runs and handing it over to the bullpen with a lead, because right now they failed to do that. They have failed, and it's not looking pretty. So I'm just going to be cautious. I'm going to cautiously say that it's not going to be a complete dumpster fire where they lose like 50, where they only win 59 games and lose 110 or something like that, or lose 100+ games. I think it's going to be, sadly enough, I think it's going to be kind of where we saw with 78 wins, close to 500. Like I said, they're going to be times and possibly kind of being like that 85 win mark where you're just barely above 500. You're flirting with a wild card spot, but I just think that the American League is too loaded for them to kind of be in that mediocrity to get a wild card. So it's, again, I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer here, but I'm just not. I have way too many question marks with this team, and you're relying on a lot of complementary pieces and young rookies that are trying to find their way in the majors to try to compete for a playoff spot, let alone a World Series. Which is sad to say because you're the Boston Red Sox. You shouldn't be in any of these situations, lest we forget that we rehash the Xander Bogaerts and Mookie Betts departures. Another show for another time, which, I mean, we've done those ones before anyways. But it is just, it's so upsetting just to see where this franchise is and where they should be if they had signed these guys and if they had been willing to spend money, because you're the Red Sox. You're the Red Sox. You're the fifth. You're always in the top 5 in payroll, but yet you act like you're in the bottom 5 at times. It's just maddening. It's maddening. It's maddening. It's maddening. And this season is going to be maddening as well, because again, there's going to be times where they tug at your heart. They tug at your heartstrings. They say, "Oh no, we might be competitive. We're right kind of in the playoff race," and then you'll be like, then you'll get a stretch of 5-6 games where you're like, "Oh yeah, this is what reality looks like with this team. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good." So again, this is just it's going to be, they're not going to be bad enough to absolutely tank, but they're not going to be good enough to get one of those last to clinch one of those last wild card spots. They're going to flirt with it, but I don't know if they're going to have it long enough. So we'll quickly take a look around the rest of Major League Baseball here as we preview the rest of this season. Now, looking right here at home, at least in the American League East, This is going to be another strong division here. Of course, you have the New York Yankees, the Toronto Blue Jays, and the Tampa Bay Rays, who the Rays are off to a torrid start. They're the only undefeated team left in Major League Baseball as they went to 6-0 today. So they are just absolutely crushing it. And the Red Sox will see them coming up on this next road trip to close things out in that series down in the Trop. But the Toronto Blue Jays are absolutely loaded. They're 2-3 right now. The Yankees are 4-2. The Orioles are 3-3. So and remember, the Orioles are going to be, they're not going to be your, I'm not even going to say your dad's Orioles, because these aren't even going to be your older brother's Orioles at this point, where they're, or I should say, in my case, I am the older brother, and because I grew up with the Orioles being just horrible in the early 2000s and mid 2000s until you got to 2012 through 2014, where they had that little bit of a run with Buck Showalter before Manny Machado got traded, and some of their pieces got a little older. But the point here is that this division is going to be stacked. And remember, MLB reduced the amount of interdivision games from the 19 to 13 this year, so or moving forward. So you're not going to have as many games against your division coming up. And again, as far as the American League East is concerned, to me, it's going to be a 3-team race with the Yankees, Blue Jays, and the Rays. For me, I'm going with it. I think this is the Toronto Blue Jays year. This is the year that I think they just squeak past the Yankees, because I think New York is dealing with a lot of injuries to their starters already, with Carlos Rodon and with Severino already, and they're just dealing with a lot of injuries that as well, as far as on the offense as well. I know they're 4-2 already, but I think at some point that's going to catch up to them. And this Toronto team, where they will, after their top three of Manoah, Barrios, and Hyunjin Ryu, the former Dodger. After those three, yes, the bottom end of that starting rotation isn't as deep as some of the other ones in the American League East division. I just think offensively that lineup is stacked. I know you did trade away Teoscar Hernandez, but you still have Matt Chapman, you still have Vladimir Guerrero, Bo Bichette, you have George Springer. You have a stacked lineup already there in Toronto. So I think this is the year that things come together for the Toronto Blue Jays. They just squeaked past the New York Yankees and the Tampa Bay Rays to take the American League East. So I have the Blue Jays winning the East, and then swinging over to the Central. For me, I always want to buy into the Chicago White Sox with Luis Robert and Jimenez, and Moncada, Tim Anderson, Andrew Vaughn, and then that rotation of Lucas Giolito, Dylan Cease, who is one of those guys that's going to be in that Cy Young race. But it's going to be, they just always let me down. So I'm not going to, as much as I want to go the Chicago White Sox, for me, the team to beat in that sense, the team that's going to take away the Central for me is going to be the Minnesota Twins. They made moves. They brought back Carlos Correa after it looked like, hey, I'm leaving you guys. I'm going to go to the San Francisco Giants for this massive deal. No, hey, hold on. No, I'm going to go to the New York Mets and sign this massive deal. But oh no, wait, hang on. We got a bunch of different injury concerns that are coming in. What's going to happen? Oh no, No, actually, on second thought, I'm out, guys. Nope, I'm out. Not gonna happen. And goes back to Minnesota, and he's now back with the Minnesota Twins as far as with Carlos Correa. So they brought back Carlos Correa. They did bring in Joey Gallo. I know Joey Gallo isn't your best option as far as if you're looking for somebody that's going to be hit for 300, hit for average, but he's a guy that's going to mash home runs. So if he can be somewhere in that in that neighborhood. I wouldn't mind that. And of course, on the pitching side, they did bring in Pablo Lopez from the Miami Marlins. That's who I was trying to think of earlier. So you have a solid rotation there with Kenta Maeda, Pablo Lopez, who I really liked and wanted the Red Sox to get. You have Sonny Gray, who was solid for them last year. So you have a pretty good rotation there in the Central. And in my opinion, it's not as good as the Chicago White Sox, but it's still a really good rotation that you have. And lineup wise, like we mentioned, you have Carlos Correa there. You have Nick Gordon. And outfield wise, you have Byron Buxton, who is finally putting that later on in his career, putting that together. You have Max Kepler, Willie Castro, Michael Taylor. You have a pretty solid lineup here going for the Minnesota Twins. So I like what the Twins have going. I think they're one of the more complete teams in the Central. So I'm going to go with the Minnesota Twins to take that AL Central. And in the AL West, I mean, I'm not going to go into this one a lot because it's going to be easy, but I'm going to take the Houston Astros. I know they lost Justin Verlander, but they still have a really good rotation, and Framber Valdez and Jose Urquidy. And then, of course, they did bring in Jose Abreu, the former White Sox, and is going to play first base and DH a little bit. So that's going to be a really good lineup there with Abreu and Alvarez and Altuve and Bregman. Just goes on and Kyle Tucker. It's just to be loaded. So for me, that's going to be an easy pick in the West. Now, as far as your American League wild cards, remember there are 3 wild cards now in baseball, and that's going to be, for me, it's going to be the New York Yankees are going to get that going to get the first wild card, and that second wild card is still going to come out of the American League East, and I'm going to give that to the Tampa Bay Rays. Get the second wild card. Now, that last wild card spot here, this is where it's going to get interesting, because this is where I'm going to have it's going to be a tight race here. And there's going to be 3 teams that I'm really going to be watching here. It's going to be the Chicago White Sox, the Seattle Mariners, and then the surprise team is going to be the Los Angeles Angels. Now, I know this is a team that really hasn't had a lot of postseason success over the last couple of years, but I think this is finally the year they put together some other pieces that are not just it's not just Trout and Ohtani. I do like some of the offseason moves. They got Hunter Renfroe. They brought in Brandon Drury. They've brought in some rotation pieces there as well. So I think they're going to be right in the mix. But my last wild card spot, I got to give it to the Seattle Mariners. I mean, I just love Julio Rodriguez. I like what they've done in that rotation. I think this Mariners team is going to get that last wild card spot again. So it's basically kind of the same picture that we saw in the American League last year. I hate to kind of, or excuse me, not the same, because the Twins didn't make the playoffs. So basically, the one team that I'm kind of swapping out there is the Minnesota Twins. But other than that, it's pretty much the same picture. But I couldn't. Or in Toronto, sorry, my apologies. But really, that's kind of what I saw there. Now, in the National League, I mean, in the National League East, I'm going to go with the Atlanta Braves. I just think they're way, way too talented to not have to not repeat as the division champions. I just love that Atlanta team. In the Central, I know the Cardinals have got off to a little bit of a sluggish start here, but I'm going to go with the St. Louis Cardinals to win that Central. And in the West, I'm going to go with the San Diego Padres. I know they're the chic pick this year with all the money they spent, but I still think they're going to win the West. Now, as far as the 3 wild card spots here, now I am going to take the New York Mets as the first wild card spot. And in the second wild card spot, I am going to go the Dodgers. So this is where this got really tough for me when I was trying to decide that last wild card spot. And to me, really it came down between the Phillies and the Milwaukee Brewers. No, I know people will, the Milwaukee's going to be a little bit of that surprise pick, but I just love that front end of that rotation that Milwaukee has with Corbin Burns and Brandon Woodruff. But Philly, once Philly gets healthy, I think Philly is just going to be an absolute wagon. So I hate to kind of go with what happened last year, but it's for me, it's just so hard not to put Philly into the playoffs. So for me, it might come down to Milwaukee still might get in. It just might be they might knock off somebody like like the Dodgers in this case. They might knock off that second NL West team, but to me, I just the Mets and the Phillies are just way too talented not to make the playoffs. Way too talented. For me, it's just the one thing with Milwaukee is just the rest of that lineup. They're just not as talented of a lineup to support that really talented pitching staff that they have. If anything, Milwaukee might be the best all-around rotation from top to bottom and bullpen wise that we see in the major league, because remember, Devin Williams is their closer, and just love Devin Williams. He's a stud, absolute stud, because remember after they traded away Josh Hader, he took over and it was just, and there was no drop off. So that was the toughest one there. But again, remember, it's the Braves, it's the Cardinals, and it's the Padres that I have in the division winners, and then it's the Mets, the Padres are the West champion, but I have the Mets, the Dodgers, and then the Phillies as the wild card spots right there within the Milwaukee, kind of right in there till the end. And then my World Series pick here for this year, I mean, the out of the National League, I'm going with the Atlanta Braves versus out of the American League. I really this was the one that I struggled with the most, but I went back with the Houston Astros to go back to the World Series just because I think they might be all around the most complete team with the most complete lineup and the most complete rotation. I almost went with the Yankees, and I wanted to burn my tongue out, and I wanted to smash my head off at the table after I almost came up with that one. But I mean, I just think what's going to hurt them is that they are way too. They have too many injuries that are going to happen, and I just think Houston is more talented than them. And again, I'm not a big fan of Houston either. I would have loved to go with the Toronto Blue Jays, but I just don't think that they're going to end up making it to. There's just going to be. I just think that back end of that rotation is going to let them down. So I'm going to go the Atlanta Braves and the Houston Astros in the World Series. And for the second time in 3 years, the Atlanta Braves are my pick to win the World Series. This Atlanta team, I love this Atlanta team. Atlanta to me is what the Boston Red Sox should have been. All that homegrown talent they re-signed all their homegrown talent. And it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So I'm taking the Atlanta Braves to win the World Series over the Houston Astros in 6 games. And as far as the awards go for both the American and the National League, for me, the American League MVP is going to go to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. of the Toronto Blue Jays. I know he's off to a little bit of a slow start here, but this is a guy that just 2 years ago absolutely mashed. He had the 48 home runs, hit over 300, was a beast. And then as far as the American League Cy Young, I'm going with Shane McClanahan of the Tampa Bay Rays. He's just a young stud himself. I just really love watching him pitch, except for when it's against the Red Sox. And then I'm just sitting there just yelling at the TV just because it's frustrating because they can't get a hit off of him or they can barely get a run. But Shane McClanahan, for me, is going to win the American League Cy Young, in my opinion. And then over in the National League for the MVP and Cy Young, I am going to go with, excuse me, I am going to go with Ronald Acuna Jr. with the Atlanta Braves as far as the MVP. I almost went his teammate Austin Riley, but to me, a full season of Acuna, he is just, when he's healthy, he's one of the best players in all of baseball. For me, it was a 3-way race. It was Acuna, Austin Riley, and then Mookie Betts of the Dodgers. But to me, again, Acuna, fully healthy Acuna is just a difference maker for that Atlanta Braves team. And I think with a fully healthy Acuna, I'm going to go Ronald Acuna Jr. And with the NL Cy Young, for the second time in his career, it's going to be Corbin Burns is going to win that Cy Young with the Milwaukee Brewers. So those are your big award winners. We're not going to get into to every single award here because that would make our show even longer, and we're already running a little long here tonight. So with that said, that is your preview for the MLB season. I hope you enjoyed every bit of that as much as I did, and remember to catch us every Wednesday night at 8:00. And you can always listen live, or you can also catch the show on Spotify or SoundCloud. Just search New England Sports Weekly. Send us any questions that you have on Twitter or Instagram. You can hit my personal account up at Sean_Met28. Same for Twitter and Instagram. With the show account, it is at NE Sports Weekly on Twitter, and then at NE Sports WK on Instagram. And then, of course, hit the like and subscribe on any forms on YouTube or on Spotify or SoundCloud. Hit the like and subscribe so that you get any notifications and get the latest shows sent right to your device. And, of course, keep tuned in next week as the Bruins and Celtics are right at the edge of getting ready for the playoffs. We'll definitely get talking a lot more about them with the playoffs coming up here for both teams. And, of course, we'll keep you up to date with everything going on with the Boston Red Sox as they are right into the thick of the season now that we've had the first pitch last week. And, of course, any more drama that comes up with the New England Patriots, we'll let you know as well. All right. Until next week, everybody, have a good one.